Hello everybody and welcome back to another Leagues 5 video. Just like my last video, as more information comes out, I'll be basically sharing everything we know so far about Leagues and any of the new changes that are going to be coming to this year's version of Leagues. And the big thing that's happened this week is we've got a massive text file going over the entire region overview. Basically, what quests get auto-completed, what content is boosted, things like that, are kind of typical to like the area overview that you would see when you're picking your regions. In fact, they've even teased this new user interface that actually shows like the region picking one, and I think it looks really damn cool. It's a ton of information, but to be fair, it's mostly things that we've already known before. It's kind of just last league's area overview. However, the league's Discord has been hard at work dissecting every single bit of information in this text file and trying to come up with any little changes that they can find that actually can mean some pretty impactful changes for this year. And luckily, there's been a couple of big revelations. So no, the thumbnail is not clickbait. Vardorvis is being added to Varlamore instead of Zaya or Korend, as it was in Leagues 4. Remember that Varlamore is a new region coming in Leagues 5, and it will be separate from Korend. And I think a lot of people have been rightfully a little skeptical about Varlamore because we haven't really even seen Varlamore Part 3 out yet, so it looks like the content is a bit lacking compared to some of the older regions. And I think moving Vardorvis to Varlamore actually is an amazing decision because Varlamore really needed like a late game boss that had a little bit more punch compared to something like Perilous Moons. That didn't go to the extreme of like pinnacle content like the Colosseum is. So I think having Vardorvis over in Varlamore still gives people a pretty difficult boss to farm without, having to go step into the Colosseum to get that same PVM experience. I absolutely love this change because I think one of the best ways to keep leagues fresh and to make picking regions still fun, if they're going to keep going with the region locked format, is to move things here or there, just so that every single year there's always a little bit of changes. Just going off of yearly updates, I don't think there's enough to really like revolutionize every zone, but they have the freedom to like move things and draw the kind of borders of these regions as they see fit. And yeah, this is just a really cool way to give Varlamore, I think, what it needed. I talked a bit about how I think Varlamore could be a good option if range is a decent route, but I actually think that now with Vardorvis being added, if you are planning to go for a more melee style in Leagues 5, there's actually a lot of content there that is really good to do with melee. Vardorvis is best done with melee. Perilous Moons is by far easiest to be done with melee, and the Colosseum also really rewards melee. I don't know how the last boss, Sol Heredit, is going to feel with magic or range, even with all the league's buffs. For me personally, I love picking regions where I don't have to do content that's like a different combat style than what I'm focusing on because it's just not very fun, just very slow kills. So this kind of opens my eyes to Varlamore, I think, as like a melee route. And we're not done with Vardorvis yet because there's been another big revelation, and that's that the Desert Treasure 2 bosses no longer require completion of Desert Treasure 2, meaning they don't require the desert anymore. That's right, Vardorvis will have Varlamore without requiring the desert. Asgarnia will have the Whisperer, and Fremennik region will have the Duke. Leviathan's the odd one here just because it is in Misthalin technically, but you'll still need the Guardians of the Rift quest to actually get there, so Leviathan will still require the desert. So yeah, if you have any one of those regions unlocked, you will be able to access its respective boss, and that means you'll be able to get full Virtus from that region, as well as you'll also be able to get the Soul Reaper Axe. Last leagues, they made it so that any of the Desert Treasure 2 bosses can drop all 4 pieces of the Soul Reaper Axe, and I don't see why they would change that this year. So that's another thing to look out for if you're going for one of those regions. And I actually think that this brings the desert down a bit just because, those other regions no longer rely on the desert to get access to Virtus, to get access to the bosses, and all their combat achievements and whatnot. Now you can kind of just get that for free with whatever region you want to go for. You might be wondering about the rings, the upgraded rings from the bosses, and I believe that will still require Fremennik, as you do need to get the pieces from the Dagonoth Kings. Personally, I think that all the Desert Treasure 2 bosses are pretty damn fun, especially with, all the bonus damage you get from these temporary game modes. And I was really happy to see that Awakened Orbs are going to have boosted drop rates, meaning that this is actually going to be a really cool time for you to go ahead and practice the Awakened versions of these bosses, or at least to, just try your hand at it and see how it goes with all the powerful effects that you typically get in leagues and the boosted drop rate. You won't be able to get the full Blood Torva set, though, as you won't be able to unlock all 4 of the region. Moving on, let's talk about raids. There's even more information that's come out. In the last video, I talked about how raids now give everybody a chance at a purple, meaning that if you did groups for Tombs of a Masket or Theater of Blood, you aren't cutting your chances at getting purples by choosing to play as a group instead of like solo or with 2 people. So a bit more information has come out about that. Basically, if you're doing hard mode theater or Tombs of a Masket at 500 invocation or higher, if one person gets a purple, the entire group will also get a purple, a unique item. The roles will still be separate, so you're probably not going to see 8 shadows drop from a Tombs of a Masket run, but yeah, it's going to feel really damn cool when you get to that end. You see that purple and everybody gets one. Now, I don't know all the details about how these drop table calculations work out. I'm sure they're still fiddling with it. But the important takeaway is that you're no longer going to feel punished for playing in larger groups. And I think this definitely makes Tombs of a Masket and Theater of Blood a lot more appealing. And don't worry, if you are a solo player, you're still going to be able to solo the raid. You're still going to get a really good purple drop rate. It might not be quite as good as doing it in groups, but I don't think you need to be too worried about that. You're not going to feel worse for playing solo or feel like you need a group to do these raids. Next, let's talk about Echo Bosses, one of the new core mechanics that's coming in Leagues 5 and a big selling point for me personally. Echo Bosses are going to be a new variant to some existing bosses that are going to offer a new challenge and new experience for players while also offering some new and never before seen rewards in old school RuneScape. I'm sure we'll get so much more information about this in a whole blog post and a lot more covering this, but here's at least what we know so far. There'll be one Echo Boss for every single region, with the exception of Mistalin and Karumja, as those are kind of starting zones and don't have the most dense content anyways. But of the 9 unlockable regions, you'll be picking 3 regions, which means you'll get to challenge 3 new Echo Boss encounters. Now, if you're a bit skeptical because last year's hard mode of some of the raids didn't really do much except just add more stats, they have confirmed that all of the Echo Bosses will also be getting new mechanics to offer that new challenge. It's not just going to be a stat increase. The goal here isn't to create an impossible challenge that you really need to struggle to beat, but just add a fresh new experience to each zone that sort of suits the increased power level that you get in leagues. So it's not just going to be that Caliphite Queen, hits you 2 times harder and that's the challenge. Along with every Echo Boss, there will be a new unique reward added as well. Some of these will be weapons and others will be equipment, so it's not all going to be weapons. And the idea is that most of them have some kind of unique flavor to them. It's not just better stats. And as for the strength level of the rewards, they're not going to be quite as good as the mega rares. So the Shadow, the Twisted Bow, and the Scythe, those are still going to be the best items for the game. But just below that, basically the Echo items will be as good as you can get. I really love the Echo Bosses and the new rewards that are going to come from it. First off, challenging some of these older bosses can get pretty boring in leagues when you're just demolishing them. So just having some new mechanics is going to be a lot of fun. And those new rewards are really going to open up a lot of different possibilities as to what regions you want to go for. I feel like more than ever, they're trying to move away from any regions feeling mandatory for any kind of combat style. So, for example, Kandarin in the desert, where they almost felt mandatory if you were going for a magic build. Well, now what if, an insanely good magic piece of gear comes from Mauritania instead? Things like that just sort of open up the possibilities and really allow you to choose where you want to go, as opposed to sort of the dictated meta. Finally, there's been just a touch on Combat Masteries, another new progression system that's coming with Leagues 5. It's been confirmed that there will only be 1 tier of combat relics this time around. We don't know what it is yet, although it's quite likely that this might be the combat style tier. That's always been a part of the Trailblazer format. But all of the combat power that you would typically find from combat relics is now going to be moved to Combat Masteries instead. Just like Echo Bosses, we don't know too much yet, but this is going to be a completely separate progression system from relics and areas. And they have confirmed that these will be permanent choices that you'll be making, so there will be some hard decisions that you'll have to make about what you want to pick and what you're going to skip. It's not going to be like a typical MMO talent tree where you can just swap and rearrange for every single encounter. And unfortunately, that's really all that we know without getting into complete speculation. Again, as more information comes out, I write it all down, and then just, once it's big enough, I come out with another video. Hopefully, we see some more news posts, especially about those Echo Bosses, because I just cannot wait to see what they've been cooking up. I think they've even said that they're scared that some of the bosses might make the old bosses just really feel bad in comparison. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys in the next Leagues video.